Hello, Mark from Teacharium here. Today we're going to look at a few different ways of doing dynamic content for branching within a lesson so that the learner goes to either different paths or sees different content within a step. The first we're going to look at is the action button. As you can imagine, it is a button that sits in your lesson. If I go ahead and select this button, we can see over here the different fields. And one of the most important options over here is the actions. I've already configured this to have an action so it goes to a specific step, but I'll show you how you could do that real quick. So I click the add action, and there's different categories of actions. So this button can actually do a whole bunch of things, but we're going to concentrate on the go to next step action. So if I select that, I can then pick an action or a step for it to go to, and then I can add that action, and it's sitting right there. Now I'm going to get rid of that one because I already had one. But this is really useful for having a button that just goes directly somewhere. If I go and play this lesson, we can see how that works. Here we are with my action button. If I click that, I'll go right to the cat step, which I had previously set up. Now, if we go back to our lesson, there's another way to set this up as well. So while an action button can do a whole bunch of different things, you do have to set each one up individually. There is another control called the navigation choice. And what the navigation choice control does is it gives you several options. The learner can choose from one of them. The content that can go in these can be a simple word like I've done here, and you can do formatted text. So if you're doing like a choose your own adventure experience, or if you were doing some kind of like dialogue and response, you could do that sort of thing here. And there's some different formatting options and whatnot. Like here I've done it vertically instead of horizontally. But this works a lot like the action button. Here's my navigation choice. It has a series of choices. If I needed to add another one, I could click this little plus button and another choice option shows up here, and I could drag in a text or an image or whatever. But I don't actually want that. If I open up one of these choices, I can see that it has a step that it goes to. So this one right here is going to the cat step, and this one right here is going to the dog step. If we go and play the lesson, I'll go to the next step. We can see what it looks like, and then if I click one of these, I go to that step. This here is also a navigation choice. So if I click the fish, I'll go to the fish step. So that's the second way for making branching type lessons within Teacharium. Another thing that we can do is have per component conditions. So here I have a step and I have two action buttons. Now, I didn't use the go to step action here. I used the set variable action. And what this is doing is if I click this, it's going to set the pet variable to the value cat. And I have a second button here, which does the same thing, but it sets it to dog instead of cat. You can see over here on the left, I have a pet variable. It starts off as just an empty string. There's nothing in it. So we start off, there's no pet selected. I click cat, and it sets the pet variable to cat, and the same thing for dog. And then I have two images here. And you notice it has a little label here that says not visible due to conditions. If we select this image, I can scroll all the way down here. There's a visible conditions. And what this says is if the pet variable is equal to cat, show this image. And the dog one has one just like that, but it's equal to dog instead of equal to cat. So if we go back to our lesson and I go to that next step, I can see that nothing is showing up. And if I click on cat, the cat image shows up. And if I click on dog, the dog image shows up. When you're playing through the lesson in the player like this, I can click this debug option up here, and a little panel will come out, and there's a variables option. So I can see what the current value is. Like right now it's dog, and now it's cat. One other way to add branching to your lessons, and that's the branching logic controller. You can see here that I have a title and the controller below it. Now the controller is a logic component, and logic components don't actually display anything to the learner. They're just here as placeholders in the editor so that we know it's there. If I select it and come over here to the right, I can see that there's two conditions. It has a condition within it that says pet is equal to cat, just like we did on the previous step. But it also has a step that we go to. So pet equal to cat, go to the cat step, and then we have something just like that here for if the pet is equal to dog, we want to go to the dog step. Now how the branching logic controller works, it actually modifies the next button. So when I click the next button, it looks at this branching logic and decides where to go. So if I come back to our lesson in our player and I go to that step, you can see that there's no display for that branching logic controller. But since we had set our pet variable to cat here, when I click the next button, we're going to go to the cat step. If I had set it to dog, we would have gone to the dog step. As you're creating all these branches and whatnot, it can be really handy to see them in your lesson. And there's this flow map. For this particular lesson, the flow map is kind of insane because you can kind of jump everywhere. But let me go show you a more realistic lesson. This here is kind of like a choose your own adventure. So you have an introduction, and then you have a choice where you're trying to pick a pet, either a domestic or exotic. If you pick domestic, it's going to ask you if you want a cat or a dog. And if you pick exotic, it's going to ask you if you want a monkey or a dinosaur. And now if we go look at the flow map, we can see very clearly how it flows through the lesson depending on your choices. These dashed orange, these are either your branching logic or your navigation choice options. These purples, these are your action buttons. So this lesson actually, in this step, it used action buttons instead of navigation choice. And in these steps here, it used navigation choice. If we go ahead and play this lesson, we could see what that looks like. So I'm going to start the lesson, and we have an introductory screen just like we saw on our map. And I'll click the next, and the first thing it's asking us is if we want a domestic or an exotic pet. So I'll click the exotic, and it goes to that exotic branch. And from here, it's asking if I want a monkey or a dinosaur. So of course I want a dinosaur. And that ends up on that final leaf node in our little tree that tells us a little bit about the dinosaur. Now, it should be interesting to know that this whole structure here, the AI was actually able to create based off a very simple abstract. So I told it I want an introduction, I want a prompt asking between a domestic or an exotic pet, then I want a second prompt, and I gave it some little information for, how I want it to go, and then told it I wanted one end step for each end selection. And I was able to go through and create all my steps and create either the navigation choices or the action buttons to make all this happen. And then I spent a little bit of time customizing that. So I put the actual content in I want, and I picked my images, and did some formatting and stuff. But it is good to know that the AI can help you do all that branching and set it up right for you. And that's one way you can do dynamic lessons within Teacharium.